And I couldn't be more proud to stand with so many elected officials, so many Latinos and Latinas. You know, in Harris County, we now have a Latina that's a county judge, we have a commissioner, we have a member of Congress, we have 5 members that are Latinos of our Harris County delegation. We are finally getting there. And the path to the governor's mansion starts right here in Harris County, right here in the East End. We're counting on all of you to make it happen. In the state legislature, it's been tough. I'm sure I don't have to tell you how tough it's been, but you know, over the last decade, Republicans have chipped away at women's health care. Republicans have ignored what the majority of Texans want when it comes to gun violence. And Latinos are at the forefront of all the issues that are on the table. Need I mention El Paso, Uvalde? You know, the state Senate Democratic caucus, a few days after Uvalde, asked Governor Abbott to please call a special session. Now, I know if Beto O'Rourke were our governor, he wouldn't have blinked, he wouldn't have hesitated, he would have called us back to pass laws raising the minimum age and having a background check and a waiting period. You know, waiting periods, that makes me think about when we've debated abortion bills and they've insisted on waiting periods, but we can't get a waiting period if somebody wants to go and buy an AR-15. And when they tell you that women, oh, you need a waiting period because you're just not smart enough to make your own decision, you need to go think about that. Well, I say we're going to show them how smart we are in November when we elect Beto O'Rourke as our governor. Let me tell you something. This guy doesn't just walk the walk and talk the talk. When our state representatives went to D.C. to address the issues of the suppression bill, guess who was there supporting them financially? Beto O'Rourke and his organization. The voter suppression bill goes after people of color, and they were going after Harris County. We couldn't stand for that. As legislators from Harris County, no way. We had to stand up. By the way, I stood up for 15 hours. I'm not going to do that today, I promise. And even though we couldn't kill that bill, sometimes you just have to stand for something. You have to be for something. You have to fight for something. And we did. And that's what Beto O'Rourke is doing for us. He's fighting for sensible gun laws. He's fighting so that women can make their own decisions. He's fighting for our teachers. He is fighting for working families. Now, I want to bring up one of my comadres from the Texas House. She's been a kick-ass member in the House. She's right here. In fact, her house is walking distance. Christina, are we going over for dinner? Please help me give a warm welcome, an East End Segundo Barrio welcome to State Representative, my dear friend, Christina Morales.
Bienvenidos a Segundo Barrio! To see so many people on this historical night right here in Segundo Barrio. You hear so many times when they talk about politics and voting that Latinos don't vote and how are they going to vote? When do they come into our neighborhoods? Beto is here in our neighborhood in Second Ward, y'all. So thank y'all for showing up today because this is important. This is where you educate yourself on the issues. And there's no doubt about it, I fully support Beto as our next governor. You will be our next governor. Because you're awesome. Because when we did it with my manita right here, Marianne Bettis, state rep, that we went to D.C., Beto showed up to help us. He used his fundraising power to raise money for us. We will never forget that. Thank you, Beto. make sure we have access to health care and that we all have good jobs. And you're a hard worker, and we know a thing or two about hard working in this area. So before I close, I hate to get somber on you, but I got to tell you the truth about our current occupant at the governor's mansion. Let me tell you, I run what all this funeral home right over there. I say adios, Abbott, because your COVID response killed thousands of people in our neighborhoods. They died. The freeze happened, and guess what? People died in the freeze from our community. 2 weeks ago, I went to Uvalde, and it was very hard, and it was very sad. And one of the parents told me, I met with Governor Abbott. And first of all, he didn't even know our names or my child's name. Adios, Abbott, on that. He's got to go. Afuera. All they want is one thing, a simple thing. Florida did it. They just want to change the age to 21 to buy an assault weapon. And guess what the governor told them? That it was unconstitutional. And they said he's lying to us. Yes, he is. As Latinos, we've got to rally around this issue. Children are dying. Our families are dying. We need Beto. Adios, Abbott. Adios, Abbott. Adios, Abbott. Come on up here, next governor of Texas, Beto.
Hey, Segundo Radio, how are we doing? Good to be with you. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to all these extraordinary public servants and future public servants, like Leslie, like Dolores, who are going to make this community proud when they win these elections in November and hold these important positions of public trust. Are you all with me on this? Really proud. Great work. We're excited for what you're going to do. And to those already holding office, Senator Carol Alvarado, who stood on the floor of the Senate for hours to stand up not for herself or a political party, but for the right to vote at its moment of greatest peril. She did that for all of us, for this generation, and for every generation to come. She is a hero of mine. She is a hero of ours. Thank you, Carol. Representative Morales and Representative Bettis, who were willing to risk leaving the floor of the House of Representatives, go all the way to Washington, D.C., perhaps risk arrest when they came back to the state of Texas, because our democracy, this thing that has worked más o menos for the last 246 years and counting, was under the gravest attack that we've ever seen, and nowhere more so than in the state of Texas, where they wanted to reduce the right to vote, where they've closed 750 polling places in this state, twice the number of the next closest state, and most of those polling place closures in the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods throughout Texas. When we see a line 6 hours deep outside of TSU on the 8th of November, and I predict that we will, part of us is proud of those who would endure the 6 hours to be able to cast that ballot, but almost all of us are overcome with that shame that we feel, that we subject anyone to this indignity in their own democracy. This attack on voting is not an attack on everyone equally. It is an attack on some Texans to reduce their political power at the same time that it elevates the power of other Texans. And it is these public servants and their fight that grab the attention, not just of this state, but of the country. So when we win this election, and when we replace these attacks on our democracy with ensuring that every single one of us has the right to vote without suppression, without fear of intimidation, when we replace Confederate Heroes Day as a state holiday with Voting Day, Election Day as a state holiday. We know who to thank, who laid the groundwork, who made this possible. And listen, I want to thank all of you. This is how you're choosing to meet this moment. We just heard about everything that we face, the attacks on our fellow Texans at this moment, the darkness that has literally descended on this state when the geniuses in power could not keep the power on for all of us last February. Instead of being tempted to despair or succumbing or submitting to this, you are literally here right now at this defining moment of truth, committing yourself to doing whatever it takes in order to overcome this. And I just want to share with you, from having traveled every part of this state, every part of Harris County, we are going to win this election on the night of November 8th. We're going to win because we are fighting for every woman to make her own decisions about her own body, her own future, and her own health care. And we remember that abortion was just as illegal in this state 50 years ago as it is today. But no one came riding to the rescue of Texas women. In fact, it was Texas women like Jane Roe, like her two attorneys, Linda Coffey and Sarah Weddington, who prevailed upon an all-male United States Supreme Court to win protection for the right to privacy, to make these very personal and often very painful decisions without risk or interference from your government. If it was Texas women who won that right 50 years ago, I tell you what, it's going to be Texas women today who win it back in 2022. We're going to win because we prioritize the lives of our kids over the NRA, the gun lobby, any special interest, Greg Abbott and his political prospects in the Republican presidential primary. Our kids are more important than all of that. And listen, we're going to make sure, because their eyes are on us, and the only voice and vote they get in this election is through our actions. What we are willing to do now, every single day through the 8th of November. And listen, we can better fund those schools and their safety and security. We can, as the governor wants us to do, increase mental health care spending. We're 51st in the nation today in access to a mental health care provider. The largest inpatient mental health care facility in the state is the Harris County Jail in downtown Houston, Texas. Yes, we can do better on that. But if we fail to acknowledge that an 18-year-old could legally walk into a gun store and buy not one, but 2 AR-15s and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and use that weapon that was originally designed for use in war, in combat, to kill enemy soldiers at 500 yards and to penetrate a steel helmet, and was used against children at 5 feet with nothing on their heads but a baseball cap, whose parents could only identify their bodies by the shoes that they were wearing or the DNA swab that they took. If we fail to act now that we know the consequences and the eyes of our kids are upon us, then the culpability is not just Greg Abbott's or one political party. It is on all of us. So as Carol said, at a minimum, let us raise the age to buy one of these weapons of war to 21. Let us make sure that there's a red flag law so that if anyone has one and is threatening to use it, we can intervene before it's too late. Let us make sure that we have a universal background check so if you buy a firearm and you're a danger to yourself or to anyone else, we're able to intervene before it's too late. Tell you what, we're going to win because we have the backs of school teachers, of counselors, of librarians who find themselves under attack by their own government and are leaving the profession right now by the thousands. They're working 2 and 3 jobs in order to make ends meet. They're being asked to report the parents of transgender kids and have those children turned over to Child Protective Services, the worst run foster care program in America today. You ask the governor about a legitimate issue, why he cannot keep the lights on, and he might say, watch out for that CRT in the classroom, trying to make us afraid of our own history. Or maybe better put, trying to make us afraid of everyone's history. Every Texan, whether indigenous, brought here against their will, or as an immigrant who came to this state to make it better, all of us deserve to have our stories told. And when we win this election, we're going to make sure that those stories are told. We're going to pay our teachers enough to just work one job instead of 2 or 3. And we're going to listen to them. When they tell us that they need to be able to connect with those kids in front of them, they don't need any more high stakes, high pressure, standardized tests. We will cancel the STAR in the state of Texas, and teachers will back to teaching. We're going to win because we're running against Greg Abbott, arguably the worst governor in the United States of America today. Let me give it to you by the numbers. This is more than just how we feel. It's been 19 days. 19 days since Abbott's extreme abortion ban, with no exception for rape, no exception for incest, that begins at conception, went into law. For 19 days, in a state that has one of the highest rates of maternal mortality in the developed world, 3 times as deadly for black women in the state of Texas, no woman has been able to make her own decisions about her own health care, her own body, or her own future. Not only is this stopping those women, including those who wore the uniform of this country, put their lives on the line defending not a president or a party, but the Constitution of the United States. Not only has it dishonored their service, I guarantee you, it will be killing women across the state of Texas, perhaps nowhere more so than right here in Houston, Texas. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we know this much. There are some who, with their resources and their privilege, will be able to lead this state. They have a complicated pregnancy, an ectopic pregnancy, or for whatever reason, it is theirs and theirs alone, they choose to end that pregnancy. But there are others who are still working $7.25 an hour jobs, and not one of them, but 2 of them, or 3 of them to make ends meet. There are those in the least insured state of Texas, least insured state in America, who do not have the ability to see a doctor or get any kind of medical care, advice, or help at all. It is to those women who falls the fate of the suffering, the devastation, and yes, the death that we are certainly to see in Texas, because everyone here knows that outlawing abortion will not stop abortions being performed in the state of Texas. It just means that there will be that much more deadly. We'll see that much more loss of life. And that is why, regardless of whether we're Republicans or Democrats, live in big cities or rural counties, we must rise up together and defend every woman's right to make that decision for herself. And we will. It has been 16 weeks to the day, 16 weeks this day, that those 19 children and their 2 heroic teachers who had already sacrificed so much for those kids, who were willing to give their lives for them, to try to make sure that some of them could survive that attack on the 24th of May in Uvalde. It has been that long, and this government has yet to lift a finger to make it any less likely that your kids or my kids will find themselves in the same situation, the same fate, the same fortune, and the same future. In a state that has 5 of the deadliest mass shootings in U.S. history just in the last 5 years, all of them on Greg Abbott's watch. In fact, the only thing he's done is make it easier for people who should not have a firearm to carry them openly on our streets. Law enforcement can tell us that for years we had a license to carry program, which meant if you want to carry a gun in public, you got to go through a background check. You have to go through some training. We have to be able to vet you in case you're a danger to yourself or to someone else. Greg Abbott ignored those who wear the uniform, who put their lives on the line, in a state where more cops have been gunned down than in any other in the Union. Even though 38,000 times over the last 5 years, a license to carry a gun was denied to one of our fellow Texans because they were deemed too dangerous to do so, he turned his back on law enforcement, on public safety, on all of us and our kids, and signed permitless carry into law. Today, the leading cause of death for children and teenagers in the state of Texas is gun violence. And though we know and will never forget the names of those children in Uvalde, we must also know this. So many kids, so many of our fellow Texans are killed, are murdered on a daily basis throughout this state. It is so numbingly common Their names don't make the newspaper. Their faces do not make the broadcast news. We have an historic opportunity as Texans who have this long, proud tradition of responsible gun ownership to do the right thing, to defend the Second Amendment, but do a far better job of protecting the lives of our kids, and to do justice by those families in Uvalde. And justice, ladies and gentlemen, means action right now. Are you with me on this? And it's been 18 months since in the energy capital of the world, our lights went out, the heat stopped running, the water stopped flowing because it was frozen in your pipes. When it ran again, they burst. And for the second time in 5 years, your homes were flooded as you still wait for the money that should be here after Harvey to rebuild those homes that were damaged the first time. And while that was happening, while you were suffering, while you were dying in your homes, more than 700 of our fellow Texans lost their lives. An 11-year-old boy not too far from here in Conroe, Texas. His mom, unable to pile enough blankets on his shivering body, he's dead the next day. 75-year-old Vietnam-era veteran who could no longer charge his oxygen tank in his home because there's no electricity running through it, takes it out to his truck to try to do it there. They find him dead of hypothermia the next day. People who burned up in their apartments because their parents were burning the furniture to try to keep them warm, or who died of carbon monoxide poisoning in their garage trying to do the same thing. This was not caused by God, but by Mother Nature, but by the man in the highest position of power who ignored the warnings about the vulnerability of the grid. And while we were suffering and dying and going without, his best friends and his largest campaign contributors made billions of dollars. $11 billion were made by energy traders and pipeline companies over the course of 5 days in February. And to add insult to injury, that grid is still not fixed. To add even more insult to that injury, you and I are left holding the bag, paying $45 on average per month more in our utility bills right now. But there's an answer to all of that. It's winning this election. It's fixing the grid. It's connecting ERCOT to the national grid so we can bring power down when we need it. And it's taking those energy traders and pipeline CEOs to court and getting our $11 billion back and returning it to the ratepayers in the state of Texas. The last number I'm going to give you before I close and open it up to your questions, to your comments, to your suggestions, and to your ideas is 8. It's been nearly 8 years since Greg Abbott was sworn into office. 8 years for him to use that highest position of public trust to actually help our fellow Texans. And I'll tell you, this is where he's left us. We are now today the least insured state in America. That means that more kids die of diabetes right here in this state than in any other. It means that our largest provider of mental health care services is the county jail system, not just here in Harris, but throughout the state of Texas. And it means that all of us are paying more for this through higher property taxes or through higher insurance premiums. There's an answer to this as well. Not only is it winning this election, but it's bringing back $10 billion of our federal income taxes to Texas every year, expanding Medicaid so everyone can see a doctor, fill a prescription, take their kiddo to a mental health care provider, and in the bargain, lowering our property taxes so that we can actually afford to pay them. It's been 8 years, and though Governor Abbott is going to try to scare all of us about crime, and he's going to try to blame Democrats who have not been in power in that office for 28 years for what is going on in the state of Texas, let me just give it to you by the numbers. So, in this state, on Greg Abbott's watch, homicides have gone up 50%. The guy who told us that he was going to eliminate rape, when asked by a reporter what he was going to do about the fact that there's no exception for rape in his abortion ban, there are more rapes committed in Texas than any other state in this country. Our ability to bring a rapist to justice has declined by half, and there are 3,000 untested rape kits at DPS headquarters in Austin, Texas right now. Violent crime is up in Texas, but violent crime is up because Greg Abbott has not done a single thing to bring it down. We're going to make sure that we take it seriously, that we protect our families, and especially women who find themselves under attack in this state, unlike any other place in this country. We're going to make sure that we have their backs, that we fully support them, that we bring these rapists to justice, but that we also not only restore protections for their right to choose, but ensure that they are treated as full, equal citizens. That means the same pay for the same day's work. That means equal treatment under the law for every single issue. And it means supporting these extraordinary women who are running for public office right now in this state. Por último, last one. 8 years. 8 years, and this guy in that office is going to try to scare all of us about immigrants coming to the state of Texas. Ask them why your property taxes have gone up $20 billion, or 40% in the last 8 years. And you just say, look out, there's Mexicans right over there. 8 years on this guy's watch. Any of the chaos that you see right now, that is Greg Abbott. This ineffectual stunt of busing migrants to Chicago, or Washington, D.C., or New York City, building 1.5 miles of border wall at extraordinary expense, or worse yet, involuntarily activating 10,000 members of the Guard. 10,000 fellow Texans who had a week to say goodbye to their kids, to their spouse, to their career, to their community, for a 1-year deployment on the border, with no power to arrest or to detain, taken away from jobs that they were badly needed in, like teaching school or being the medical professionals in our communities at a time that we need them. 8 of them so far have lost their lives. 4 of them have taken their own lives. 4 more have died under questionable circumstances. Not a single one was killed by a single immigrant. Instead of these kinds of stunts, we need solutions. This is what I say, based on what I've heard from you and our fellow Texans from across the state. Look, if you want to come to this country, we want you to be able to do so, but you must follow our laws. And on our side, we're going to make sure that our laws reflect our values, our interests, our needs, the reality right here on the ground in the most diverse city in the United States of America. And Houston is so strong and so successful and so great, not despite, but because it is a city of immigrants, people from the world over who have come here to do better for themselves, but also do better for all of us, and they have. If we ensure that if you want to come here to work, or join your family, or seek asylum because to go back to your home country means certain death for you or your child, I want there to be a safe, legal, orderly path for you to be able to do that. It's been since Ronald Reagan was president that we had any kind of rewrite of our immigration laws. No state better than Texas is prepared to lead the effort on this. We border Mexico. We are a state comprised of people the planet over. We lead on this. And all of a sudden we take all those coming to work, join families, seek asylum off the table. All that's left is anyone, the vast minority, who want to do us harm. If you are trying to traffic drugs into this country or this community, smuggle human beings, we're going to be able to stop you. Right now, a needle in a haystack of people who are trying to come here for legitimate reasons. We solve those legitimate challenges. All that is left is the threat. We are going to be that much stronger, that much safer going forward. And oh, by the way, we in Texas lead on this. We in Texas solve this. No longer will immigration be left to demagogues like Greg Abbott, who seek to vilify and demonize immigrants, who tell us that we must repel this invasion, we must take matters into our own hands. He describes Texas as being under attack. That's the kind of message that was heard by a young man with another weapon of war in Allen, Texas in 2019, who drove that AK-47 650 miles to El Paso, walked into a Walmart, and opened fire on people who looked like to him that they were the immigrants who were coming to invade this state. It is time that we solve this problem once and for all, and that we solve it right here in the state of Texas. We can do this. Now, As we turn this second microphone over to you, I want to make this offer too. If you want to be part of the solution on this, if you realize there is no candidate alone, no political party by itself that is going to win this historic, incredibly important election, that the responsibility rests with every single one of us, and we must reach the voters who are the very targets of the voter suppression and voter intimidation that the senator and the 2 state representatives fought against. Then I need your help. I need you to sign up with one of our volunteers who's wearing a yellow vest. I see one right here, I see another one back here, I see another one here, and another one here. They have on their clipboards that they are carrying block walking shifts, which means that you sign up for one of those, you're going to meet your neighbors, and you're going to go knock on the doors of those people who were targeted for exclusion from this very democracy. In 2020, arguably the most important presidential election in our lifetimes, 700,000 people in Harris County who were eligible to did not cast a ballot. Since then, more than 200,000 new voters have entered the polls. These are overwhelmingly young people and naturalized citizens. That's nearly 1 million people that we have yet to hear from or whose votes have yet to be counted. 1 million people right here in Harris County. And in 2018, when we ran against the junior senator who, when you were freezing, was at the Ritz-Carlton in Cancun, we only lost by 216,000 votes. There are 1 million untapped votes in Harris County. Are you willing to go out there and find those voters with me so that we win this election? Thank you so much for coming out today. Thanks to everybody who got us kicked off. Looking forward to what you have to say. I'm looking forward to winning this election with you and for you. Let's do it. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Cynthia Como is where? Ok. Sí, y podemos responder también en español. Sí.
If you have a question, si tienen una pregunta, suben su mano, raise your hand please, and I will make my way around the room. The only thing that I will ask you is please keep it to one so that we can get to as many people as we can. We will let this woman go first.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Consuelo Ramírez. Soy de las millones de las personas que estamos en este país, que nos dedicamos a cuidar personas mayores, niños y personas deshabilitadas. Necesitamos tener un representante digno, que sepa que nuestro trabajo es el trabajo más importante para todo el mundo. Necesitamos a las personas mayores que nos representen, a que les importen a los niños que van a la escuela. Mi trabajo es esencial. Soy inmigrante, soy latina, y como me dijo mi hija, mamá, te hizo falta que te colgaras el molcajete. Sí, mi hija, el molcajete, el nopal y todo. Para saber que soy latina y necesito que se me escuche mi idioma. Gracias, Beto. Sí se puede, sí se puede.
Sí se puede. Gracias. Consuelo, gracias por estar con nosotros y gracias por su pregunta. La gente que están cuidando a nuestros vecinos, la gente que vive con nosotros en nuestros hogares, nuestros padres y abuelos y abuelas, y también nuestros hijos y hijas, están ganando como casi 8, 9 dólares por hora. Necesitamos aumentar el salario mínimo. Ahora es 7.25 hasta 15 dólares por mínimo. Y también necesitamos tratar con dignidad y respeto que merecen por el trabajo tan importante que están haciendo. Gracias por su servicio, gracias por apoyar la campaña, gracias por estar parte de la solución que necesitamos en este momento. Y agradezco. Gracias.
To your right, Beto, to your right. Here we go.
Sí.
Next question, here we go.
Hi, thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Lauren Morton. I'm a student organizer at the University of Houston. And I'm proud to be from one of the most diverse universities in the nation. I'm proud to be from one of the most diverse cities and one of the most diverse states. But what I want to ask you is, over the past few years, Governor Abbott has funded billions of dollars into border security to fight illegal immigration and the drug war through Operation Lone Star. Will you continue to fund law enforcement and ICE through Operation Lone Star, even knowing that a couple weeks ago, a man in Brownsville was detained and deported in less than 24 hours through the program?
I'm so glad that you brought this question up. And as I was sharing in my comments, after 8 years, including Operation Lone Star, including I think it's $5 to $6 billion that has been spent of your money and mine and that of our fellow Texans, the border is no safer than it was before this started. Arguably, it is much worse. When you don't have the accountability that I think you're asking for right now, when you assume that you can deploy DPS in record numbers at the border, see tickets written for driving offenses of U.S. citizens go up 1,000% in the Rio Grande Valley and throughout South Texas and along the border, this involuntary deployment of our members of the Guard. And if you were wondering whether those DPS troopers were going to be able to secure our communities, we just learned there were 91 of them outside of that school in Uvalde on the other side of an unlocked door for more than 70 minutes. We are not going to win this or solve this through the use of brute force or law enforcement alone. It's why we need solutions. Listen, you all read the story, I hope, of those 53 migrants who died in the back of that tractor trailer. You have to put yourself in their position. What would cause you to climb into the back of that trailer? What would cause you, once you're in the back of that trailer, to reach down, grab the hand of your 11-year-old daughter, and bring her up there with you?
Freedom!
You don't do this for kicks. You don't do this to steal someone else's job or place in our society. You don't do this for the red carpet that some on the other side are saying that we roll out to these migrants. You're probably doing it because you have no other choice but to do this. When I put myself in that person's position, that's the only thing I can come up with, because we've got an 11-year-old in our house as well. How could I ever put him in that position? It's if that was the only position that might save his life. So those who want to come here to seek freedom or asylum or refuge or work a job that frankly no one born in this state is willing to do, those who want to join family and find themselves in the back of a 20-year line. That's the line from Mexico if you want to do this the right way today. We must offer them a safe, legal, orderly, and far quicker path than they have right now. Because though I do not condone or justify those who jump the line or cross in between ports of entry, I certainly understand why they are doing that today. So we can continue to play games, spend billions of dollars of your resources, and end up with the same result. That's the very definition of insanity. Or we can end this involuntary activation. Allow those DPS troopers to patrol the highways in other parts of the state. This is the deadliest year for traffic fatalities on Texas highways since 1980, because all of those troopers left our roads, went down to South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, and the border. And start focusing on solutions that solve this, so that we're not talking about this the next time someone is running for governor. You've got my commitment and my support to get this done. Thank you for asking the question.
And before we go to our next question, just want to recognize Brett Wally is here. He's back.
Armando Wally, thank you for being here.
Wally is back there. Thank you so much. If you lost a phone and you need to find your phone, go back to the merch table where the t-shirts are, and they have a phone there.
Hi, Beto. So happy to be here. Big fan. As you said, this is a city of immigrants. I myself am a daughter of immigrants. We have brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers who wake up every day and have to drive to work to make a living for their families. Do you have a plan to make sure that they can get on the road safely? And if they get stopped, providing a valid ID for the police officers?
Thank you for asking this question. You go to Brownsville, Texas, and you meet those, as I have, who are picking the food, including the onions that we depend on, that will be on our dinner table tonight. You meet immigrants who are working high-end, high-skill, high-wage jobs in other parts of the state, but who are undocumented because they could not find that safe, legal path to be here. You think about the hundreds of thousands of so-called dreamers, the DACA beneficiaries, who were brought here at the age of 1 or 2 or 3 and have been doing their best to do well for themselves, have been doing their best to give back to all of us. In fact, I think one of the first people to lose their lives during Hurricane Harvey, who took the boat off his family's property, put in wherever he could, drowned trying to save others, was a dreamer, was an undocumented immigrant. Just as American as anyone else here, save for that citizenship and that permanent status. We are not only not doing the right thing by those who want to do right by us and by our history of being a state of immigrants and people from the world over, but we're also losing out on the benefit of everything that everyone here can produce. So the first order of business are those solutions that I just talked about, making sure that Texas leads the way in this nation, rewriting its immigration laws to reflect our reality right here in Houston, or my hometown of El Paso. That safe, legal, orderly path to be here. But in the meantime, if we cannot force that leadership at the top, we've got to make sure that we do better here in Texas. So things like a Texas-based guest worker program for somebody who wants to come here and work and be documented in the process, I think that's worth looking at. I think having a permit to be able to drive on our roads so that we know who's on our roads, we know that they've taken that driver's test, we know that they're insured, we know that all of us and they as well are safe as a result, that makes sense as well. These are the right things to do, but they're only temporary solutions until we get to the big one, which is that comprehensive rewrite of our laws that must begin right here in the state of Texas. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Keep going to your right. To your right.
There we go.
I'm going to do 3 more questions.
Hello, Mr. O'Rourke. My name is Marcus. I was born and raised in Houston, Texas. I'm from Missouri City. Love the area. And I'm a minimum wage, low wage, paid fast food worker. The reason I bring that up is because I want your opinion on raising the minimum wage here, which has one of the lowest minimum wages in the country, to such a broad population as regards to raising it to $15 an hour, which is a living wage.
Jamarcus, thanks for being here. Yes, let's raise the minimum wage at least to $15 an hour. That has to be complemented with expanding Medicaid so that minimum wage workers can actually afford to see a doctor, fill a prescription, go to a mental health care provider. It means investing in things like universal all-day pre-K so that people can afford to have their kids actually learn to read and to write while they go to work or finish an education or do whatever they're on this planet to do. And the last, but maybe the most important thing, this state is a so-called quote-unquote right-to-work state, which means that it's very hard for people to use the leverage of the value that they provide for their employer, the wealth that they're helping to create, to get better working conditions, or better wages, or better safety for themselves or for the public. I would love Texas, after we win this election, to become a right-to-organize state so that you can actually get that done. Supporting unions and labor in the state of Texas is the surest way to improve working conditions and wages for everybody. Thank you, Jamarcus, for being here. Appreciate it.
Okay, same area, straight ahead.
Right here.
Gotcha.
Mr. O'Rourke, I'm Joseph Tiarina. My concern about the red line law that they're implementing, trying to implement about the laws, I'm afraid that it might be discriminatory if people like us can be stopped and be classified under a list that could harm us later on. How would you explain to limit that injustice?
Yeah, great question. This question's about the proposal for a red flag law. I mentioned it earlier in the solutions that if we recall a special session, bringing Republicans and Democrats around the table, I think we could get this passed. What it means is that if you already have that firearm, but you're threatening to use it against yourself, you're threatening to use it against somebody else, law enforcement through due process could intervene before it's too late. So in Uvalde, that 18-year-old who bought the 2 AR-15s, he was sending off such strong signals about what he intended to do that his friends called him the school shooter before he ever walked into a school and shot anybody. There was no recourse for law enforcement. The El Paso shooter, his mom called the Allen Police Department and says, I have no idea why my son wants or needs this AK-47. She may have also signaled other signs of distress in his life. The cops, because there's no red flag law in Texas, said, I'm sorry, good luck, you're on your own, we'll see you later. He drove to El Paso, killed 23 people in the coming days. But the gentleman brings up a legitimate question. How do we make sure that when someone flags a gun owner for this kind of due process and due diligence and potentially intervention, that it's not done frivolously? And we don't profile people based on their ethnicity or their race or any other difference between any of us. I think that's why we've got to write that red flag law on Texas terms. I don't think we wholesale copy anybody else's. I think because we know this as a challenge today in Texas through other ways in which the law is enforced in this state, we must be able to predict that it might happen with this new law. So ensuring that there are protections and provisions that prevent the kind of profiling that you're talking about, those are the kind of Texas-based values that I want to make sure are included in our red flag law. Thank you for asking the question. I appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
All right, my last two questions, this woman and then this young lady right here.
All right.
Thank you for being here, first of all. You mentioned the STARS test. As we know, it's a $90 million scam that affects us every year. How will you address basically getting rid of it so that, one, our teachers can go back to teaching, two, our students can release that pressure that they are taught from the moment they go to school in pre-K, and actually teach them and address the epidemic of literacy gap that our students have. Most of the schools in Houston are Title I. My children go to a Title I school, and 75% of the students cannot read at a 3rd grade level.
You know, someone just yelled out part of the answer that I was going to give. We're going to make sure after we win that the next TEA commissioner is a classroom teacher. They need to have some experience actually connecting with kids. When I listen to these classroom educators, these school counselors who right now are at a counselor to 500 student, counselor to 800 student, counselor to 1,200 student ratio, these librarians who knew they were so dangerous to the rest of us, right? Who are under attack by their governor day in, day out. What they tell us is that after 2 years of this pandemic, 2 years of learning loss, the fact that in a 4th grade classroom prior to COVID, 70% of the kids, 7 out of 10, could not read at grade level. The last thing they need is a high-stakes, high-pressure test that will take not hours or days, but months to prepare their students for. That school's accountability rating, that teacher's prospects over the course of her or his career hinge on the performance of this test. That's why my kids, we've got 3 of them in the public schools in El Paso, they're anxious the day before that STAR test, probably because their teacher is anxious the day before that STAR test, probably because that principal, that superintendent, those trustees and the school board are all anxious. And to what end? It in no way effectively measures the potential inside of that child or the performance of that teacher who's trying to connect with them, right? So let us follow the guidance of these teachers who say, listen, Beto, after everything that's happened in this state in the last 2 years, these kids who've lost their grandparents, whose folks have lost their jobs, who they may have lost their homes, they are suffering right now. The level of suicidal ideation in Texas public schools is at an all-time high. Many of these teachers tell me, Beto, I'm just trying to keep them alive right now. So at a minimum, let us cancel this STAR test. Make sure that they can focus on the well-being of those children. Yes, their academic achievement, but also their social and emotional well-being. We know that these teachers are there for them almost as no one else outside of their parents or their family is. So let's make sure that we have their backs and support them. Thank you so much for asking the question.
This is our last
one. Okay.
I wanted to ask how you're going to protect schools when there is a gun shop near it and it's easy to access for an active shooter and they can just go straight to the school.
Yes. Great question. You know, I just met a student who was at one of these schools that was under lockdown today. There was an active shooter threat. My children have been through those threats as well. Yours probably have too. Each of us who has kids knows when their child comes home from 2nd or 3rd grade and tells you that their teacher taught them how to hide under the desks or how to go into a closet and be quiet against every instinct that that little kid has, because they need to practice for what happens when the shooter comes in the door. And the fact that this continues to happen, and happened not too far from here in 2018 at Santa Fe High School, and yet not a thing has been done in this state to make it less likely that it's going to happen going forward. like those 3 initiatives that we talked about, universal background checks at this gun store, or a red flag law, or raising the minimum age of purchase, or we heard from the state representative or the state senator, maybe some kind of cooling off period or waiting period before you're able to get that gun. All of those make sense, as does removing the immunity which gun manufacturers enjoy today. They can sell directly to these 18-year-olds with no fear of prosecution, accountability, or justice. That is absolutely wrong, but totally expected when you have a governor who, the very week of that Uvalde shooting, still chose to address the NRA convention right here in Houston, Texas. A governor who showed up the next day after those 19 kids and those 2 teachers were killed and told the parents it could have been worse. The night before, in fact, he went 300 miles in the opposite direction to a fundraiser instead of going to Uvalde to be with those parents. We need a governor who is focused on you, who feels accountable to you as I do. Your judgment is something I fear. Next time that I come back as your governor and you ask me this question, I want to be able to tell you that we've actually been able to get something done. So thank you for being here, making sure that we do better. Segundo Barrio, thank you so much for coming out today, for supporting us, for volunteering with us. We are so grateful to you. Gracias.
If y'all would like to stay and take a picture, say hi. We're going to be back by the Texas flag, and we would love to say hi and take a quick picture.